Recognize Umbral Walker D01. Recognize the Caleb G D02.
Hello, team. Welcome to the cave. I am the Caleb G, and I can hear you glaring. I am here to introduce the man who is stuck with teen think in his head, Rich Howard.
You're doing well. This is great.
As always, welcome to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files. We are here to talk about Young Justice. If you'd like to get a hold of us, our website is crashingthemode.com. You can find us on Twitter at the YJ Files or email us at whelmedpodcast@gmail.com.
Who are you?
And with all that out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to you, Rich. Let's get this episode going with...
Hello, Megan.
Infiltrator is our episode, not Infiltrators. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Air date was February 11, 2011. We are still doing well on a weekly release date. I can't even remember when it got wacky, but it's pretty soon. The in-episode date starts August 7th with our pre-credit scene with Red Arrow, and then the rest of the episode takes place on the following day, August 8th, with the team. The director was one of my hands-down favorites, Jay Oliva. Despite me not being a big fan of Welcome to Happy Harbor, Jay Oliva he's just fantastic. The writer in this one was John Weissman, who is Greg Weissman's younger brother. Greg Weissman, of course, is the showrunner, one of the showrunners and producers of the show. John Weissman also wrote some of my other favorite episodes, including Performance, that we'll see later in the season as well. This episode's a ton of fun, but also, again, plants a lot of good seeds for the future.
And I also would like to point out here that this episode features the voice work of Alan Tudyk as Oliver Queen, and a personal favorite of mine, Miss Tara Strong, as Dr. Roquette.
Yes, love Tara Strong. Gosh, she's good too.
Oh yeah, she has so many different roles in the DC animated universe, but that is a topic for another time. We have a mission briefing to get to.
Just in time for your next mission.
Our scene, the pre-credit scene, opens up with Speedy, who we find out pretty soon is actually now calling himself Red Arrow. New costume, new gear and equipment. Is infiltrating an island base to rescue a scientist who we find out is Dr. Roquette, who is a nanorobotics expert kidnapped by the League of Shadows. Those of you who've seen the Batman Begins movie that name will sound familiar as well. It's the organization founded and led by Ra's al Ghul. Unfortunately, the project that the Shadows were forcing her to create, she managed to complete it just before she got rescued, and it is now in their hands.
And now, as the episode proper starts, we actually get a great little break in the action because we're seeing the team hanging out and socializing. This is a real nice throwback to something you said a while ago, Rich, that Teen Titans and Young Justice is about making a family. And we see some of that social family development. Wally is stuck in school, first day of sophomore year, and we have this great back and forth scene of Wally just being miserable in school. And we cut to Calder, Superboy, McGann, and Robin kicking it at the beach. They're playing volleyball, they're grilling, and poor Wally, he's getting pummeled with dodgeballs. He's just having such a bad day. And then as soon as the school day's over, he zetas to the cave, and there's someone new there. This is Artemis, the niece of Green Arrow.
Who no one's super excited about, particularly Wally. They already have an Archer, he said. He wants Speedy on the team badly. They've known each other for years, and he wants that to happen, but he's not. So once he first mentions, well, what about Speedy? That's when the new Red Arrow, Roy, shows up at the cave. Asks the team's help for protecting Dr. Roquette. Her invention that she had created is called the Fog. It is a massive cloud of nanotech infiltrators that not only break down and destroy things on a cellular level, but also steal information. So they can steal electronic information from computers or whatnot, store that information, then destroy the source material, and then return that information to whoever is controlling the Fog. In this case, it is going to be the Shadows. The team, including Artemis, agreed to protect Roquette until she can program a virus to break it down.
So the rest of the episode really focuses on the team protecting Dr. Roquette from assassination attempts and trying to figure out what's happening with this fog. Primarily, Dr. Roquette is being targeted by Cheshire, but Cheshire also brings along Black Spider, who, even though he doesn't really say a lot in this episode, as a fun little aside, is voiced by Josh Keaton, who voiced Peter, Spider-Man, in the Spectacular Spider-Man series. And also tagging along as an assassin is Hook, a guy with a big hook on his hand. The dynamics of the team and their interpersonal relationships are really explored during this episode, mostly because Artemis is showing up as this huge outsider. And even though we are, at this point, 5 or 6 episodes into the series, depending on how you count the pilot, the team has really formed at this point. It's solidified. And bringing in Artemis as this weird outsider that everyone's a little suspicious of shines a light on their dynamic and how they are willing to accept and interact with Artemis.
During the episode as well, while most of the team is protecting Dr. Roquette, they manage to track down the fog, or find a way to track the fog. Robin and Superboy take the bioship to track the fog, but aren't able to stop it before it steals data from a Star Labs facility and then destroys the entire building. So we know that the League of Shadows has knowledge collected by Star Labs on a number of things. Star Labs, as you know from probably several other shows, is a nation, if not worldwide, research facility that focuses on kind of the more bizarro, extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial, superhero kind of based science. Luckily, Dr. Roquette is able to finish the virus before the fog is able to do the same thing to a Wayne Tech facility, which is also being targeted in the same city. I believe it's the same city that the Star Labs facility went down on.
This moves on then to the final fight of the episode. Cheshire is one-on-one with Artemis and actually loses her mask. And we have this moment of Artemis recognizing who Cheshire actually is. Cheshire knows who Artemis is, and Cheshire makes a threat to tell the team about Artemis's past and her secrets. To combat that, Artemis lets Cheshire get away. However, the team is very much impressed with Artemis. They welcome her, except for Wally, because Wally is Wally.
Wally. Which leads us to into the final scene. Everything seems to be okay. We get this little mystery about Artemis. We have a scene where Artemis is returning home and steps out of a Zeta Beam transporter into an alleyway where Red Arrow is waiting for her. He makes the clear statement that he knows she's not Green Arrow's niece. And he would know since he's been with Green Arrow for years, and threatens her, "Don't hurt my friends or I will take you down." And then the very final scene is actually cutting back to the League of Shadows like we have in a lot of these episodes, where a senior member of the Shadows, known as Sensei, who's kind of their logistics coordinator, reports to the Light about the loss of the Wayne Tech information. But one of the Light's members mentions that it's fortunate that they have an operative on the inside of the team. So that's our dun-dun-dun for this particular episode.
And so with the mission fully briefed here, let's start.
Superboy, are you alright?
I'm fine. Feeling the Aster.
There's a lot about this episode that I really, really like. And there is one of the first things in the series that I don't like.
Interesting.
It's very, very minor. It has nothing to do with anything. It's just a personal preference.
I have one of those too. I'm wondering if it's the same thing.
It is not, because I'm looking at our notes.
Ooh, interesting. All right, why don't you dive in this time? I usually lead it up. Go for it.
Okay, well, let's start with the good stuff. There was so much great about this episode. A lot of great action, a lot of character building as we see the team doing things differently from scene to scene as they are split once again. Honestly, I think what made this episode great are details. So many details are in this episode. A lot of them are spoilers. A lot of them make sense later as we look back after certain secrets are revealed. But there's so many just fun things in this episode. First and foremost, I mean, let's talk about Calder.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a throwaway line. When Cheshire is poisoning him, he makes a comment about Atlantean skin being tougher or thicker than most.
Right.
And then she makes a comment about jellyfish toxin.
Yeah, he says jellyfish toxin. I'm largely immune.
Right. Actually, you're right. Calder says that, not her.
Yeah.
So he recognizes the toxin as it's affecting him.
Yep.
It's so subtle, But it's this fun detail that just fleshes out who Calder is as Aqualad, what he's bringing to the table, the level of skill he has, and we see a little bit more about the character.
Right. We've seen his more obvious powers, his water control powers, his weapons, his bioelectricity. But there's a lot of subtlety to him. I mean, as you're watching the show, you see him go toe-to-toe with Superboy. Superboy beats him in the first episodes, for sure, but he's clearly stronger than your average quote-unquote sidekick. But then to have some of these little nods and things as they introduce things, this is kind of the showing, not telling. Although he does make a comment about Atlantean skin, he's really just answering the observation of Cheshire when she says that must have hurt.
And that's a nice little echo of kind of those cheesy comic book lines.
Yeah.
When superheroes and supervillains are fighting, they have one-liners. They quip, right?
Mm-hmm.
They spar with words. So
yeah.
Yes, this show is awesome because we don't need to hear that to build this story. We don't need a statement, I am Atlantean, I am super strong and immune to toxin.
Yeah.
But the way it develops within the context here, it's a little bit of a nod to the fact that sometimes silly things happen in comics and people say funny one-liners, and it's okay.
Cheshire is the quipper of quippers in this series, and I think that the actual comment felt natural. It could have been heavy-handed. It seemed like a perfectly reasonable response. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, we see a lot of good stuff with Aqualad in this one. We get to see a little bit more about it, his strengths and his limitations as well.
Oh, yeah. He definitely pushes himself very hard in this episode. And I think that's one of the cool things about his character. He specifically says to Dr. Roquette at one point, I will protect you.
Yeah.
A definitive statement.
And there was this pause in between when she's complaining and he comes up and puts his hand on her shoulder, I think, and he just has this moment, this beat of like his compassion and his leadership and his charisma come across in that one simple statement that could have, again, been overacted. Of course, we got Carrie Payton, who's freaking awesome voice actor, pulling off Calder as well. Just really well delivered. Again, knowing as a writer what to do and when not to do things. And in this case, that beat tells us more than the line, that calming presence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that all speaks to the fact that Calder is a competent hero, a competent leader, and that he is essentially a prince of Atlantis and carries all of that weight of
that
what
presence
he brings. Yeah. There's a whole lot to talk about with Artemis specifically. I think some of the best things to talk about are her and Wally.
Yeah, her and Wally's dynamic. Pretty funny. Pretty classic, understandable. Again, like Wally being Wally, classic. You know, he wants Speedy on the team. He's been clear about this from the very beginning. He doesn't know who she is, who this woman is. They have their personalities clash and grind in a very funny way where she runs out of the room and tells Wally, take him down. I'm following the leader, or, whatever. And he's like, you don't tell me what to do. And she's all, just do it. Just shut up and do it. And she runs out the door. They just have like this great, again, constantly have to give nods to the voice actors because they really pull off this chemistry that works really, really nicely. And of course, we'll talk about a few things having to do with this dynamic in the Crash in the Mode.
I think it's funny a little bit, maybe more odd than funny. We've seen Artemis in the introductory credits the entire time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right.
They did not change the intro before or after she showed up. So as viewers, we've known that there is this blonde girl who shoots arrows, but she hasn't shown up yet. And now all of a sudden, here she is.
And she's such a counterpoint to Megan. Right?
Yes. Megan came in as this weird, ditzy character, but she's starting to grow on us as viewers. She's very clearly out of her element. She's unsure what it means to be on Earth. Yep. She's trying to create a family. And then we have Artemis thrown into the team as this very confident, very proud, I'm the best, I'm here, deal with it kind of character.
Yeah, Megan wants to fit in, and Artemis is not a panderer.
She's there to do work.
Yeah.
If we take the context of the show, she is a sidekick who is here to be a hero.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, bringing her in adds for this great dynamic. And ultimately, we're going to see that she does get integrated into the family of the team. Mm-hmm. Even though her demeanor and confidence doesn't change, it does soften a little bit.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, and she becomes really good at cooperation and teamwork. She really integrates very well.
This is a good moment to show how you can have someone, using a role-playing game term. You can have inter-party conflict while everybody's still on board, for what needs to get done. It's just different ways of getting it done. They don't stop each other. You don't see Wally and Artemis like actively working against each other in the episode, just commenting about various things, right? And observations, right? And that develops character. We could talk about Wally and Artemis, and we will talk about Wally and Artemis a lot from now on. But I really, really liked that Artemis was such a counterpoint, almost an anti-hero to McGann's almost over the top wanting to please and be a hero. And we're going to see so many more of these dynamic female characters later on as well. So just so many different views of how relationships develop, period, for family. It's just so much about family. Especially with Artemis, it's about family.
Especially with Artemis. Family is a huge underlying theme through all of Young Justice.
Right.
And
exactly.
We've talked about it, and we will continue to talk about it. Another good example of a two-person dynamic in this episode is Superboy and Robin.
Yeah.
They get sent off in the bioship to try to track down the infiltrators.
Yeah, absolutely. Analyzing and breaking down this fight scene with Robin and Superboy, two completely different characters in their behavior, their actions, and their abilities. It really shines a light on how the writers really have every character working at their peak every single episode. Superboy is doing his thing, right? He's working with the team, but he's still like act first, ask questions later, where Robin's trying to do something else. And it's not, again, like they're working against one another. Superboy and Robin work well together and are playing off each other. Superboy faces down Professor Ojo, and it's more of a physical confrontation, while Robin is getting into the Wayne Tech building and transferring the virus and doing all the things that Robin should be doing. Particularly, in scenes where it's a Wayne Tech building and they're shutting everything down, like security is being locked down because something is attacking the building, which is appropriate. But to hear him running at like this gate that's falling and have him say Wayne Tech override RG4 and slide under the thing and do his thing, it's just Robin thinking. I just love watching Robin think and put these things into action. And the RG4, it took me a while to figure out because like it's a little bit quick. You'll hear later on they'll be doing phrases like HOJ, which is Hall of Justice, override, that kind of thing. But RG was hard to see, and the subtitles actually say Archie 4. So, which is not what he says. He says RG, and it's clearly Richard Grayson. The 4, I have to admit, throws me a little bit. I'm interested as to why it's 4. Could be a random number, but they don't do much of anything in the show randomly. So I'm not sure why the 4. I'm interested to see if any of our fans happen to know why.
Yeah, I do not have an answer to that one. Plus, I'm a little bit lazy, so when there's a fun little detail, I say, hey, that's cool. Let's watch the rest of the action.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing about watching the show over and over again, because I do a lot of that the first few times that I watch the show. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, oh, now that I've watched the action and how just been into the show so much, now I'm able to like look a little deeper because I'm not caught up in just how flat out good the show is.
I also really liked how Robin was so caught up in the moment. He almost said something about the connection between Wayne Industries and the Justice League.
Right, absolutely. With Superboy's reaction too. So they're in the bioship and Robin's like, oh my gosh, they're attacking a Wayne Tech building. Theoretically, they could use that information to hack and Superboy's all, the what? Like, he's super worried because, like, Robin's worried and he doesn't want his friend to be worried. He's like, the what? And Robin's like, never mind. But what's funny about that is when I first saw that, I was like, that's weird because he's brought up the Batcave and the computer in the Batcave before. So why is this weird? And then I realized of course, rewatching it, that he was mentioning the Batcave and the computer in the Batcave to Kid Flash and Aqualad, who he's had years and years of relationship with, who know who he is. And even with the new team, Superboy, McGann, Artemis, it's been very clear that Batman has told him, you do not tell him who you are. You do not tell them anything else that you don't need to. And that makes sense. At first, I thought it was a bit of a hiccup, but it's not. It actually develops character about almost how much Batman trusts the team, right? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting.
Did you want to touch on Black Spider a little bit?
Oh yeah, Black Spider. There's a long history of DC and Marvel Comics stealing stuff from one another. Hawkeye is in the Marvel universe is clearly an echo parallel to Green Arrow. It just always depends on who comes up with it first. Black Spider is DC Comics' way to kind of nod to and make fun of Spider-Man. Basically, Spider-Man if he'd gone bad. But here's the great thing. Greg Weisman was the showrunner on Spectacular Spider-Man. So obviously he got Josh Keaton to come on and do the voice of Black Spider in a couple of episodes to give a nod to that show. I have to admit, I had not seen Spectacular Spider-Man until our mutual friend James D'Amato from the One Shot Podcast Network couldn't stop talking about it. And I went back and watched it once it became available. Great show. Go check it out. For Marvel Comics animation, I think is generally pretty inferior to DC Comics animation. Their movies obviously are fantastic. The animation can sometimes be hit or miss. Spectacular Spider-Man is a fantastic show. You should go check that one out as well. But I love that this is kind of a twist, like, what if Peter went bad? Or what if somebody not Peter was given powers? And I like it a lot.
So I think now we need to touch on the things we did not like about this episode. I think they're very minor.
They are minor.
They're very picky, but we're at the point where we can find these picky things.
Yeah, and here's the thing. When you have a show that's just flat out this good across the board, when a little thing jumps out, it feels bigger than it really is. It's not. It's something that you can just kind of ignore, but you kind of can't because the background in which it sits is so beautiful. The flaw jumps out. I want to hear yours first.
Mine is Dr. Roquette herself.
Oh, interesting.
She's a little bit of a throwaway character. Obviously, the stuff she's doing, the nanites, the programs, that kind of stuff has a big impact on the story as the season develops here. But as she exists in this episode, I felt like she was just a really annoying character.
I don't disagree with you. She's not a likable scientist. You know what I mean? She's
right.
For sure. She's not happy. She makes a lot of snide comments about Red Arrow not having backup and about I couldn't get the Justice League and now I have to program with Teen Think in my head. Like,
right.
I agree with you. I'm not a fan of her as a character. I do think that it was kind of painted red a little bit, like made obvious when Aqualad kind of recognizes that her snideness and her anger and her frustration may be coming from her fear, where he has that pause and he says, "We will protect you," in response to, I can't remember which snide comment it was. Having said that, though, I don't disagree with you. She's not a character. Right. I'm glad she didn't technically come back again later in the series, unless we had seen her with some character growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not saying that the role she played was not important and that her actions and attitude were not justified. And they did provide a nice counterpoint in the episode.
Yeah.
We saw her being kind of the human analogy here. They're superheroes, they're supervillains, something crazy is happening. I'm going to be really scared. Obviously, she's scared about what's happening. Yeah. But instead of expressing fear, she snaps to this default snide smart aleck comment. So we could really look at that's being her defense mechanism. Yeah. And being snide like that is a nice opposite to the team being confident in their skills. Right. But it was just the one thing in the episode I didn't like.
Yeah. It's that grain of sand in your sheets that when you're watching it, you're just like, okay, yeah.
Right.
I hear you.
The one bad thing in an otherwise beautiful episode. Right. So what about you, Rich? What was your gripe here?
Mine is so picky, and I'm gonna qualify that out front. Artemis's bow is clearly a compound bow. I think it's great. I think it's a counterpoint to the longbows that are being used by Red and Green Arrow. But you have a show where there's at least 3 archers, right? And I'm a big archery fan, so I'm glad that we had a recent, between the Brave Disney movie and Hunger Games and some other shows and Hawkeye, we're seeing a lot of archers on there, and I've always been a fan. When I was playing Champions in the 80s, one of my favorite characters was an archer. I just love it. So I think that's why it jumps out at me. The animation on her bow is wrong. It's just flat out wrong. When you have a compound bow, yes, it has 2 strings, but you're only using one of those strings to notch your arrow to. When you're knocking an arrow, you're doing the farthest string away from the bow itself. I guess I kind of could have given it a bit of a pass as some kind of weird technological thing, except through the whole series, they flip back and forth. In some episodes, she uses a single arrow, a single string, and it looks great. And in other episodes, she's using both strings. I'm sure it's an animation thing. I don't know how much the director has to say about that, or how much the writer has to say about that, or whether it's just the animation team, which I believe is overseas, understands the difference between a longbow and a compound bow. It should be a minor thing that I shouldn't really care that much about, except for the fact that I love archers, and you wrote a show in which there were 3 archers, and you purposefully gave her a compound bow. It just seems like such an obvious thing to miss. I did have a brief conversation with Christopher Jones, who is the fantastic artist who does the comics, and asked him about it because it also happens in the comics. He did not draw all of the Young Justice comics, but he did a lot of them. And he said he was basically going off the show, and he's not an archery person, and there's so many characters and a big ensemble cast. I mean, it's inevitable something like this is going to get through. It just bugs me every time I see it. That's my grain of sand every time I'm watching an episode because, again, it's the series is near perfect. So something like this, it really just it jumps out, and it's a bummer.
Right. But being so minor, it's one of the things that it doesn't detract from how much we enjoy the show.
No, not at all. It's all about the character, and something like this isn't that big. But again, we got to kind of bring that stuff up.
So I think we have gone through the episode here in detail. Why don't we swing over for a Canary Debrief?
Stick around. Class is in session.
One of the things, and we talked about a little bit in the last episode too, that works really, really well, and I'm speaking mostly to people who are running games, so role-playing games, but also when you're writing stories as well, this may come up, and that's the idea of splitting the party. In the last episode of Schooled, the party is split, right? You have 3 characters following one truck and 2 characters following another truck, and Caleb had made a mention of how the action jumps back and forth between, what's happening. This is something you can easily do in a role-playing game, and I think people are so paranoid about splitting the party for a number of reasons, but the ability to jump back and forth between scenes and having those beats work, a combat like that could have been in the same place. It's irrelevant. You do the same initiative counts, you do whatever you need to do. I recently ran a game of Edge of the Empire for an actual play that hopefully should be airing pretty soon. My party was split 3 ways. I had one guy in space and one guy in atmosphere and a bunch of people on the ground, and had to jump back and forth between scenes. It's finding those beats, finding those natural places, cinematic places to jump back and forth and move and still tell the story that you're telling. Young Justice does that very, very well because it's a team effort. In this episode, they do the same thing where you have Superboy and Robin doing their thing. When they're flying between cities or flying between locations and things like that, it's the perfect time to take that beat and go back. Yes, there's some action, of course, as the assassins are attacking, but also take that moment to get those role-playing moments and then cut back to what Robin and Superboy are doing and going back and forth. It's okay to do it. Just make sure that not everybody is sitting around too long. Give if you're talking about players, give the players other things to do. Have the players play your villains, right? While the other players are off. Have whoever's playing Robin and Superboy play those villains. Play NPCs. Give them a few notes. I wrote a bunch of stuff on this on Tribality as well about splitting the party. You can check that out there. But it can be done. I have some other things to say about storytelling, but unfortunately I have to couch them under crashing the mode because they are things that have layered some scaffolding for relationships in future episodes.
Well, let's just jump right into that then.
Tell us something we don't know yet.
Sorry, BB. We can't risk altering the time stream. We do that, we're all feeling the mode.
Folks, this is Crashing the Mode. We are talking about spoilers. If you do not want to hear spoilers, if you want to be surprised by everything that happens in Young Justice, stop listening and skip ahead. If you're still here, we're going to talk about some spoilers. In previous episodes of the podcast here, we have tried to avoid some of the big surprises, even though we are crashing the mode. There's a huge one that we can't not talk about in this episode, and that's Cheshire and Artemis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Before we get into that, though, I'm gonna make a couple comments and then we'll build in. Is that all right?
Sure. You're the boss.
So the first thing that jumps out at me is the title, which is Infiltrator. It's not Infiltrators. And the reason why this is subtle is because Robin specifically references the fog as infiltrators. The infiltrators have been outfiltrated, right? So when I went back to retype that in, I actually was typing in the title of this episode and realized that I had titled it wrong because I titled it Infiltrators, and then I realized that the S isn't there. And then I realized that the title is actually not a nod to the fog, it's a nod to the fact that someone is a traitor to the team. We get a hint that there's a mole with the introduction of Artemis, obviously her apparent connection to the shadows. Red Arrow, knowing that she's not Green Arrow's niece because he's been with her for years. Cheshire's mysterious comments about her history. I mean, she comes off as the obvious choice. Now, clearly from a storytelling standpoint, and this is my nod back to the Canary Debrief, or one of them anyway, she's clearly a red herring. I mean, she's the most obvious choice. The thing is, we don't care, and we're still not quite sure. Because it's written so well that it's like, do they know we know? And so they're knowing that we know by knowing that we know and knowing that, and then do we think that it's a red herring, but it's not really red herring, but it is. They still manage to keep us off balance as to who is going to be doing what in this episode. And nodding to this too, you get Robin, right? As soon as she shows up at the beginning, first of all, they say, who are you? And Green Arrow and Artemis both say, I'm his niece. At the same time, in a way that, methinks thou dost protest too much, kind of a little...
It was very well rehearsed.
It was very well rehearsed, right? And somebody was like, oh, wait, that wasn't my line. That was Green Arrow's line. Whoops, that kind of feeling. But then, of course, Dick is in the background going, another niece, huh? You can tell he doesn't buy it, but he's rolling with it, right? Of course, Wally doesn't even pay attention. He's just pissed that there's another Archer on the team, right? Wally being Wally. And then later on in the season, so at the very end, when we finally get this reveal of who Artemis is, Robin's like, I knew the whole time. Which is nice, but it's a little bit of, it felt like a Deus Ex Machina until I rewatched the whole series again. And I realized that several episodes before Robin admits that he knew, he almost reveals it. Because he's in a conversation and Batman's in the room and Robin's like, oh, but her family is... And Batman's like, stop talking, right? So they actually did plant that seed earlier than this kind of weird Deus Ex Machina, oh, of course Robin knew because he's, cool or whatever kind of thing they planted at the end. And then really the last kind of tweak that before we actually reveal the big reveal is the weird, awkward moment at the end of the episode where McGann says, I always wanted a sister. On Earth, I mean, I have 12 back on Mars, but trust me, it's not the same. And Artemis saying, I wouldn't know. But thanks. And it feels awkward at first because she's being welcomed into the team and it's clearly something she's uncomfortable with, being trusted by other people. So that's kind of how you read it the first time. But then later on, we discover that Cheshire is her older sister and that scene has a whole different impact when Artemis is like, I don't know about sisters. Once again, awkward, but couched in an understandable way that makes us not really notice it as an odd statement at first, because in context you can see how the rest of the team wouldn't have sent up a red flag.
And all of that goes to demonstrate something we said a little while ago. This episode is about details.
Yeah.
The obvious details in the action are great, but the details here are building the story of Young Justice.
Yes.
Robin expressing his disbelief, and then later that payoff that he did the research and knew, that also speaks to him as a character, always thinking, right, always knowing. The fact that he is a detective at his core.
And the counterpoint to at the end of the episode, even Red Arrow said, there's got to be a reason why Bats and GA are lying. So I'll let it slide. Red Arrow needed to say that for the plot. Robin didn't need to say that. It was clear that's what Robin was doing. Because he's just like, oh, another niece? All right, let's go with this and see what happens. Let's see where this goes, because clearly Bats and Green Arrow are lying through their teeth, but let's just see what happens. But we didn't need to have that pointed out with Robin. At the end, Red Arrow makes that point and makes it fine.
Another line that probably wasn't intended to mean anything, but kind of does through deep analysis. At the very end, when Artemis Zeta's back to Gotham and Red Arrow is there in the shadows, she turns around, draws an arrow, and says,
oh, yes. Oh, I forgot about this line. Yes. No, I think it was totally on purpose.
You think it was?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So she says, step into the light.
Yep.
And then they have this exchange that we just started talking about here.
Roy is standing in the shadows, and she makes this again. It's about the subtleties. It's about the conversation, right? It's just so good. Another flashback to what we already revealed in the first episode, which is when we find out about that this mole exists, Roy really wants to find that mole, and that mole is Roy. So to have a scene again where she's saying step into the light, and he comes out of the shadows into the light, again, it's these double entendres, right? These double meanings to these statements that make more sense when you see it again. I love it because I can see what the writers were doing, and I want to do that as a writer. Not only do I want to do that, and I want someone to tell me that they got it. You know? And that's one of the reasons why I want to do this show. And it's one of the reasons why I talk about the podcasts I love so much. Because when you throw something out there into the universe, you create something that you love, you enjoy, you throw it out there, you hope some people enjoy it, but you're doing it for yourself, the best that you can do. To have someone come back and say, that worked, you got me, I loved it, I hope makes them understand that the work that they put into it, the subtlety that they put into it was appreciated.
There was another line like that, not quite as deep earlier when Artemis first showed up in the cave. Wally says, like, you would know anything about the shadows. And there's just one of those long Young Justice beats.
Yep. With the smirk on Artemis's face as she looks over her shoulder at him, and then the pause.
Yep.
And then Wally, who are you? Again, with that subtle animation storytelling that they do so well in this show. I just love it. I love it.
Now here's something I puzzle over. At the end of the episode, we have Sensei talking to the light.
Yes.
We still see the light on their individual monitor screens. They're staticked and blurred out. But when Sensei is speaking, he is speaking to one specific member of the light, and that member responds to him.
Yes.
Now, I know, because I've watched the series, I know who he's talking to, and I know who are the members of the light. I know these people. Yeah. I can't figure out if this is a point where I would have guessed it or not.
So here's the thing. If I remember correctly, the guy doing the voice for Ra's al Ghul is the same guy who did the voice of Dr. Fate in the Justice League series. His voice acting is fantastic, but his accent is perfect for these kinds of characters. I remember thinking, okay, clearly this is a bunch of supervillains. This show is showing us a bigger, wider world. And there's only one person talking this time. I bet this is Ra's. So I was like, okay, so Ra's is leading this team of villains. So they still got me, because that's not what's happening. But it did end up being Ra's. And I'm glad about that. And he shows up a little bit later as well. Of course he shows up later. Oh, God.
Because Ra's shows up everywhere.
He's everywhere.
Ra's is one of my favorite villains. I love Ra's al Ghul.
He's a great villain.
So much.
He's a great villain. I mean, I remember the first time reading anything about Ra's was Son of the Demon back in the 80s. Such a fantastic, deep, wonderful storyline for the 80s for Batman. And, of course, the birth of Damian, who is Batman's son that showed up in a bunch of the animated series, who we're hoping to get in a season 3.
Oh, that would be so awesome.
Yeah, and maybe advance... Well... I guess we're in crashing mode. Advance Tim from season 2 into Red Robin. Of course, we already have Nightwing. Maybe see Jason Todd come back, as he's been nodded to in the second season as well, and come back as Red Hood. So could be some really great advancements to the storyline for season 3 that I really want to see.
Well, I think there are 2 more brief points here in crashing the mode we need to touch on.
Sure.
Very, very quickly. The bickering between Wally and Artemis, very entertaining, very funny, but it establishes a dynamic that we will see pay off as we get into season 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do this through the whole season, and it's fun, it's funny, it's entertaining, it's that inter-party bickering. And I guess maybe in retrospect seems kind of obvious, but Wally and Artemis end up as a couple, which we see kind of hinted at the very season finale of season 1, and then into season 2 in some of the most touching, uplifting and heartrending moments for both of those characters as they grow, particularly Wally, who grows so much again, just like Superboy, just like Miss Martian, grow and change into the second season. I just love it. I don't like romance for romance sake. I like romance that makes sense. I can't think of a single romantic relationship that comes out of this show that didn't make perfect sense to me in where it started, in where it was, and where it went.
Absolutely. Everything that happens in Young Justice happens for a reason.
Yeah.
There is nothing that is just a throwaway. Everything comes back together.
Yeah.
And that brings us to our last point here.
Yeah.
Dr. Roquette does factor into the events at the end of season 1 here. What the light stole factors into it.
Right.
Everything comes full circle.
Right.
And we see that this technology and what Dr. Roquette was creating is part of the light's, at this point, grand plan.
Yep. And this is, again, nods back into the storytelling, the Canary Debrief again. There are a lot of characters that get established that end up kind of just coming together in a perfect finale ending. Dr. Roquette, Queen Mara, we'll get introduced to a little bit later. Dr. Spence, who is one of the genome scientists at the very beginning in the first episode. Volko, who's the Atlantean scientist as well. All of these characters have been established, get established in their own episodes that make sense, but play into the bigger picture, at least in the end. They don't come back in the end in the finale, but the fact that they exist helps the ending make sense and makes it not feel like a Deus Ex Machina. Like, where did the team get this technology to be able to counter the light's plan? Well, remember all these characters we introduced through a whole season that owe the team? They all came together and worked together to do this amazing thing. Unfortunately, from a dialogue standpoint, Doctors Roquette, Spence, and Volko and Queen Mara is a mouthful. And so when Aqualad's commenting on them, that they help them at the end, that dialogue is really hard to make out. It actually took me a long time to pull out everybody's name. Because, again, the subtitles didn't help at all because it just said gibberish or something like that. Like, I can't tell what this is, kind of a thing, whoever the translator was. So it took me a while to figure it out. But.
Alrighty, so we have spent a lot of time here crashing the mode.
Yeah.
And of course that's fine because this episode was all about future events.
Yeah, laying groundwork for sure.
Yep, absolutely. So let's wrap up here today. Let's get on to fan service.
Let's do it.
And this time I am going to bring an AMV to the table here.
Oof.
I blame you for this, Rich.
Excellent.
Because after you started sending me a couple of them, of course, YouTube just automatically suggests all of these other things to watch. So I've been falling down the rabbit hole.
And I hadn't seen this one, so you got me.
So this is a Young Justice AMV. It's called This Is War. It is made by someone called Fervagaff.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that properly. It's a YouTube video. We'll have the link in the show notes. It is to a fantastic song by 30 Seconds to Mars, which is a great little nod there because, Jared Leto's the Joker now. And this song is so perfect for the content. There's so much in here that is just synced up perfectly. The song calls out people in different roles, and the animator pulled great characters to match what the song is singing about.
Yeah. I was really impressed. Actually, Caleb was watching me on the video because I watched it right before this. We recorded this episode, and I literally had tears in my eyes. I was crying at this one. They got me on that one. It's really, really good.
Also, though, this video spoils the bejesus out of Young Justice.
So many spoilers. A lot of these AMVs do. So I think we've mentioned it before. Just be aware. This is definitely a crashing the mode level of spoilery.
But it's good, guys. This
really
is
good. Such
a good video. The song fits the animation perfectly. Mm-hmm. It's really well done. It's not choppy. I'm probably gonna have it on repeat a little bit while I'm editing later. So
yeah,
I love it. I love it.
I think on our resources page we'll probably have a link to. I have a Young Justice AMV playlist, and I have added that on. We're going to make nods to more of these, but if you just can't wait, go ahead and link on over there. It's a public playlist, and you can check out some of these. And if you have more to recommend to me, please do. I would love to take a look at them and add them to the list because, man, a good AMV is just killing me. These people know what they're doing. They know the show, and they know the music, and they know how to edit. And that's 3 amazing skills to me.
Yeah, so again, link in the show notes, of course, under resources at crashingthemode.com. You will find all of this stuff. Please get a hold of us if you have something you would like to add to that list or something you would like us to talk about here on Whelmed. But with all that being said, I think it is time to head out of the cave and wrap up this episode. Everyone, thank you so much for giving us a chunk of your time here today. Rich and I appreciate it so much. We love talking about the show, and we love having you share it with us. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time, and remember to keep feeling the Aster.
Yeah, and hashtag keep binging YJ, everybody. And don't forget, stay whelmed.
You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our computer is voiced by Madison Ray. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.